This video is brought to you by CuriosityStream and Nebula. Star Trek. Whew, I'm sorry. That was more aggressive than a gay Klingon at Disco Pride Night. I did not mean to start off this video that strong. Anyways, hello my beautiful friends. If you've been watching my channel for longer than, say, 2 seconds, you've probably noticed that I like Star Trek just a tiny little bit, just a teensy bit. I mean, I know I keep it on the down low a lot of the time, but I am a big Trekkie. Big shock. I mean, I literally have Star Trek tattoos on my wrist and another one somewhere else in my body that I sadly can't show you. No, like literally I can't show you. It's actually on my ankle and I'm not really that flexible enough to get it on camera, and I'd probably flash you as I lifted up my leg with this dress that I'm wearing, so yeah, best not. And now that I think about it, maybe I should get a wormhole tattoo on my vagina. So yes, I love Star Trek a little bit, and I know a ton of you in my audience are here for my nerdy Star Trek content. But I also know that many of you have come to my channel because of my discussions on other topics like trans issues or LGBTQ issues, things like that. And one of my greatest joys is seeing folks who enjoy one type of my content find the other and kind of fall in love with it too. Many of you nerds out there, and you know who you are, have sent me really honestly beautiful messages that really mean a lot to me about how you've learned a bunch about trans issues from me when you never expected to. You just came for the Star Trek and stayed for the trans content, as many of you have told me. And like I said, that brings me a ton of joy, and you honor me by that. Like legitimately, there's no greater honor than that. Except for the other honor that I get, the other joy that I feel at seeing folks who come from my more political and social issue focused discussions get sucked into my passion for Trek. It just makes me so happy to share something that has honestly continually inspired me for my entire life. Like the reason I do the social and political and LGBTQ stuff is because of all the stuff that I learned and morals that I learned from Trek. Trek is the reason that I feel so passionate about working to make the world a better place, to get to that more hopeful vision of the future and of humanity that Trek constantly inspires and aspires to. It's a vision of a time where the entirety of humanity will not only accept, but take delight in infinite diversity and infinite combinations, in the differences of others. It's why that is what is tattooed on my arms, infinite diversity and infinite combinations. And it also takes delight in sex salamander babies. Oh yeah, that's a thing in Star Trek, more on that later. But because of this dichotomy of the two different focuses of my channel, I actually get a ton of messages and comments from folks saying that they want to get into Trek because they got excited about it through me, but have nowhere to begin. I mean, Star Trek is kind of a daunting franchise to enter into. It's 55 years old and it literally has 13 movies, 7 live-action TV series, another one premiering later this year, at least 2 more in development, a short-form series, 3 animated series, dozens of video games, hundreds of comics, and literally hundreds of Star Trek books, and I have quite a few. I like Star Trek books. Don't judge me like a Q would judge me. I just like Star Trek books.
This is a merciful court.
The amount of Trek out there can honestly be pretty overwhelming. Believe me, even as someone who's been watching Star Trek since I was like 11 years old, I still get more hot and bothered than a Vulcan on Risa during Ponfar trying to explain the entirety of Star Trek to somebody.
You are my mate, not his.
But to be fair, to me, as a huge sci-fi nerd who, due to my obsessive nature as an autistic person, literally dives headfirst into learning every single thing about a franchise that I fall in love with, from Star Wars to DC Comics, despite their vast sizes, I actually find that Star Trek is one of the most welcoming franchises for people to just jump into, despite how long it's been around and its size.
Permission to come aboard, sir.
Granted, sir. Granted.
Pretty much every Trek series or movie, for the most part, can be watched right from the start without much confusion to new people. Honestly, the easiest answer on how to get into Star Trek is just pick a series or movie that interests you and just get trekking.
Commander, set a new course. There's coffee in that nebula.
Yet I also know that every single entry of Star Trek brings its own faults, endearing idiosyncrasies, and successes. Some that may work for some folks, and some that may turn off others, or confuse and push out even more folks. So today, I want to attempt to create a comprehensive resource with this video for folks just trying to get into Star Trek for the first time. And I'm going to go through all the ins and outs of each entry in the franchise to just give you a little bit of a sampler taste of what each show and movie is, what you'll get out of each, both the good and the bad, in order to help you cater the best starting place for you or your friends if you want to get them into Trek. Also, with that said, some of you may be asking the really important question of, why do I have a whiteboard? And the answer is literally no reason. I just bought a whiteboard for some other videos that I have coming up that I'm excited to get to you, and I just need to justify owning it, so I'm putting it in more videos. Also, I realized that standing up in a video and having a whiteboard just gives me a ton more energy. Unlike some YouTubers who will get all uptight if you mention that they seem to have more energy when they have a whiteboard, I don't get really uptight about it. Steve Shives. That joke was some deep lore stuff that I'm sure like 3 of you who are fans of my work and Steve Shives' work got, and the rest of you are just like, I have no idea what's going on. Don't worry about it. The 3 people who found it funny, you're probably laughing your butts off right now. One last tease here. While I am going to be going through every entry of Star Trek, and I think every one is a fine place to start, if you stick around to the end of the video, I'll also give you a few different ways that I think are the best ways to go through the franchise. Each one crafting a different way to get into the final frontier and offer a different perspective or experience for those that may want that. So stick around for that, but with all that finally being said, let's engage. Let's hit it. Warp me! Let's fly. Or, whatever Janeway says. Fuck Tuvix, let's warp, probably. That sounds like Janeway.
Delete the wife.
So, before we get Star Trekking across the universe on the Starship Enterprise under Captain Kirk. Sorry, had to do it. Anyways, if you're interested in watching Star Trek, which I kind of assume that you do considering you clicked on this video, and if you don't, well, thank you. I really appreciate you being here regardless. That's really nice of you. But regardless, I'm going to assume either way that you're a nerd. And don't worry, there's no judgments. This is a nerdy safe space. We're all dorks here except for Garrus. Garrus isn't a dork. He's just my shy Turian boyfriend. Okay, look. I'm filming this video on Valentine's Day, so I'm lonely, okay? Anyways, since you're a nerd, I assume that you probably like to learn some things, which so do I. It's why I like making nerdy and educational videos on this channel. And because of that, recently I was asked to join Nebula, which is a curated streaming service platform that's now Streamy Award nominated that allows me and many of my fellow educational style YouTube creators like PhilosophyTube, Cat Black, FD Signifier, and Foreign Man in a Foreign Land, and numerous other wonderful, nerdy, but in a slightly different way than my dorky face, people and educators to have a place to make videos that are sometimes more outside of the box than are typically allowed on YouTube, have access to some really cool production resources and opportunities, and most importantly to me, have a chance to have more financial stability, as well as be able to make videos away from the dreaded algorithm worries. For example, actually, the video that you're watching right now is actually way longer than I originally intended it to be. The original concept for this video was to be like just 15 and 20 minutes, something I could just easily just beat out, but you can look at the runtime of this video to see how badly that failed, because if you get Jessie talking about Star Trek, she's gonna talk about it for an hour, gosh darn it! But I originally had planned for this video to not only include Star Trek content, but content on the Orville and Galaxy Quest. That sort of adjacent, but kind of sort of maybe legally distinct, but we're fans, so who are we to give a crap Star Trek stuff? But considering that this video is already incredibly lengthy, I knew that the algorithm wasn't going to be super friendly to it. So since I had actually spent the time writing those sections out, I decided to put that stuff over on Nebula as a Nebula Plus exclusive. So if you want to hear my additional thoughts and recommendations about Mocklins or how freaking wonderful Alan Rickman is, well, by Grabthar's Hammer, that's over on Nebula right this minute. And it's only through the support of both Nebula, you, my viewers, and especially my patrons that allows me to have this platform and be able to just be a big dork and have those algorithm-free videos over on Nebula Plus. And it should be noted that one of the ways that Nebula is itself able to support creators like me is through its partnership with the wonderful Curiosity Stream, a subscription streaming service with thousands of documentaries and nonfiction titles. So if Nebula is a place for education-y and nerdy creators like myself to try out new ideas, Curiosity Stream is all about the big budget professional documentaries. In fact, one documentary that I recently watched was The First Picture of a Black Hole, about how scientists got the first picture of a black hole. And no, it wasn't a picture of the place in my heart where my love of Ethan Peck's beard died when he shaved it off. It was actually a really cool donk that I learned a lot about black holes from. Again, huge dork. So, CuriosityStream is an awesome streaming service, and even better, Nebula and CuriosityStream formed together to help each other out. They've worked out a deal where if you sign up with my URL below, not only do you get access to CuriosityStream, but you'll also get Nebula for free. Not a trial, not a test, not some weird crazy, time travel Star Trek shenanigans, but full Nebula access as long as you're a CuriosityStream member. Also, for a limited time, CuriosityStream is offering an exclusive discount for the annual plan at 26%. So that's just $14.79 for an annual plan. So you get my pretty face, you get some nerdy documentaries, you get other educational people, you get to hear me rant about the Orville and Galaxy Quest. I kind of think that's a good deal for everybody. And in the words of an important Star Trek adjacent figure,
by Grabthar's hammer. What a savings.
Plus, on a more serious note, as someone new to Nebula, using that URL below specifically with my, jessiegender tag and everything on it does really help me out and helps me get more sponsors and be able to do bigger stuff on this channel and on Nebula. So if you are considering getting Nebula for my content or other people's content, of which there's numerous other amazing stuff on there, or you're interested in CuriosityStream, which is itself an awesome service, please use that URL. It would really help me out. But with all that said, enough of the businessy wisnessy stuff. Let's get into the weird sci-fi optimistic future and get trekking. Okay, so before we get into the specifics of each series, I think since this is going to be a comprehensive video, it's worthwhile quickly to go over the things that every single Star Trek series has. Well, I think the joy of Trek is that it is so diverse in its style and tone that it can go from comedy to thought-provoking stories to Irish ghost alien sex candles. There are a few core things to know about it beyond it's a bunch of people in pajamas exploring the galaxy in the future. Number one, it's earnestly optimistic.
The most profound discoveries are not necessarily beyond that next star. They're within us, woven into the threads that bind us. All of us.
The whole ethos of Trek, from its beginning, is a hopeful vision of the future. That humanity will one day get over its damn self and want to earnestly reach out to explore and learn about the galaxy and others. That humanity will never be perfect, but one day, our singular collective goal will be to strive for perfection through understanding that our different imperfections are what make us beautiful. And different series do this in different ways. Sometimes it's so enamored with its utopian vision of the future that it gets kind of stuffy and up its own butt, like early seasons of Star Trek The Next Generation.
I wish we were able to learn more about them, sir.
In time, Mr. Data, when we are better prepared. I wanted to create a place where living things could thrive. And all the while, I was about to destroy the life that is there.
Or it sometimes showcases the worst parts of humanity in order to show us how we hold on to redemption and optimism even in the darkest of times, with things like Deep Space Nine or early seasons of Star Trek Discovery.
Do we need a mutiny today to prove who we are?
And more often, it's somewhere in the middle, showcasing an imperfect humanity, but one that's striving always for a better future. Number two, it's political. Now, not every episode of Star Trek is political. Sometimes it's just Ferengis fucking around doing Ferengi shit, or whatever the hell this is.
Am I doing it right?
You don't have to be quite so gentle.
But every Trek show and movie has at least on some level tried to speak to issues of today through science fiction metaphor. From the original series addressing racism to Star Trek Discovery taking on how to handle mental health during unprecedented times like a pandemic. Now, sometimes Trek does this in cringy ways, sometimes very cringy.
Mr. LaForge, out of orbit, warp 5.
Yes, sir.
Certainly, sir.
And sometimes it's preachy.
Down the centuries, you have slurred the meaning out of the words, we, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity, to ordain and establish.
And sometimes it gets it very, very wrong. Like, very wrong sometimes.
And what I've decided goes against all my principles.
But on the whole, it's a franchise that aims to be about something meaningful, and often it hits the mark.
First time any man's freedom is trodden on, we're all damaged.
Number 3, it's of its time. While each show was ahead of its time in many ways, they also were of their times in many ways too. And I'll talk about that a bit for each series, but while it's always working to showcase humanity's best, each show fails sometimes in its own self. There's occasionally sexism, homophobia, transphobia, racism, and things like that.
Just thought I'd ask.
Dax must be crazy.
And I personally don't think that any of these things define the franchise, but it is something worth knowing going in, and the older the Trek series is, the more likely it is you're going to see that. And on that note, self-promoting here a little bit, I'm actually doing a series of videos called Sex in Star Trek, which analyzes a lot of these issues, both the good and the bad, and the first of which is out now if you want to see it. It's honestly one of the best videos I think I've ever made, and I'm pretty sure you'll love it, and it's meant for both new and old Trek fans alike. Number 4, it's inconsistent. Now, I am talking a little bit about quality. That happens with every single franchise that's this old. There'll be fluctuations in how good or bad it is over time. But I'm also talking about something else. The more you get into the Trek community, the more you'll probably hear a lot of people yelling about Trek canon online, about how the stories all connect together or don't connect together. And certainly, I think there's a lot of fun to be had looking at the cohesive history and truly deep lore that the franchise has produced. But again, it is 55 years old and has had numerous entries written by hundreds of writers and creators, and as a result, it's never been completely consistent with itself, even in the early days, both in terms of how stuff works, the lore, or even the visual look. And it's totally okay, by the way, if that throws you or bothers you. It doesn't throw me or anything like that. I usually just explain it as Q did it, or time travel.
See you in the 24th century.
I look forward to it. Or should I say backward?
Don't get started.
But again, it's part of the franchise that if you watch all of it, you're gonna notice there's a lot of things that don't fit together, even when there's a bunch of things that do, especially character arcs. I think character arcs carry through the franchise really, really well across even different series and different actors. And honestly, the inconsistency is part of the fun. And finally, the most important thing you need to know about Star Trek, it's weird as hell.
I am sorry, Counselor.
No, don't, no!
Some people like to say that Star Trek is hard science, that it's super realistic and hard-hitting sci-fi. And yes, it totally can be. It touches upon some really important topics. And it can also feature some really realistic and important science that we could all learn from. But also, sometimes you get stories about horrid alien board games.
It's only a game.
Or Vulcans needing to fuck so bad that they'll kill their best friend.
Captain Atkinson is trying to raise
Let me alone!
Or how humanity's destiny is to one day evolve into salamander sex babies. Honestly, it's part of the show's charm, but just know, it's weird. Star Trek is weird. It's very weird.
I thought that I looked appropriately sinister.
No comment.
It's kind of why I love it. But anyways, that's the basics of Star Trek, and with that said, let's get into the specifics. Star Trek, the original series. The one that started it all. The original series is a classic for a reason. It set the standard for sci-fi storytelling in its day, mixing in really thoughtful, grand sci-fi adventure with some fun concepts and truly great character work and dialogue.
You can't tell me that when you first saw Jim alive that you weren't on the verge of giving us an emotional scene that would have brought the house down.
Merely my quite logical relief that Starfleet had not lost the highly proficient captain.
Yes, Mr. Spock, I understand.
Thank you, Captain.
Of course, Mr. Spock. Your reaction was quite logical.
Thank you, Doctor.
In a pig's eye.
Yeah, within that, it also has some fantastic performances from pretty much everyone in the cast, but most especially Leonard Nimoy, whom many of us kind of take for granted today considering how long the show has been around and thought of in pop culture. But dear God, is Leonard Nimoy so good as the half-Vulcan Spock, wrestling with his emotional human and logical Vulcan side.
Mother, how can you have lived on Vulcan so long, married a Vulcan, raised a son on Vulcan, without understanding what it means to be a Vulcan?
Well, if this is what it means, I don't want to know.
It means to adopt a philosophy, a way of life which is logical and beneficial. We cannot disregard that philosophy merely for personal gain, no matter how important that gain might be.
Nothing is as important as your father's life.
Can you imagine what my father would say if I were to agree?
There is a reason that Spock has become one of pop culture's most known and classic characters. And on top of that, the triumvirate of the Kirk-Spock-McCoy relationship is absolutely glorious.
Splendid examples of Homo sapiens, the very flower of humanity. I found them quite refreshing.
I'm not sure, but I think we've been insulted. I'm sure.
It's also got a lot of that camp that is so endearingly 60s in the best way, and there are some truly bonkers episodes, especially in the third season, that are just kind of laugh at it kind of fun.
We just want to talk to somebody about Spock's brain, that's all.
Brain and brain! What is brain?
It's also got that endearing, everything is made of cardboard and duct tape kind of feel to it with its sets and its props, and it has some, you know, at times very hammy acting.
I got a Kirk! I got a Kirk!
But also, it still has those hard-hitting episodes that still resonate today, that speak to issues of today.
In any contact with life and intelligence as fantastically advanced as this, but I must point out that the possibilities, the potential for knowledge and advancement is equally great. Risk is our business. That's what the Starship is all about. That's why we're aboard her.
It also not only set the standard for all Trek after it, but for a ton of TV science fiction and science fiction in general. It's also episodic to an extreme like most shows of its day, so you can kind of bounce around and pick any episode at any point and you're pretty much going to be set. That being said, it is also sometimes very 60s in the worst ways too. It can be a bit sexist at times, and sometimes it can be very sexist in very problematic ways. I'm looking at you, the enemy within.
The posture had some interesting qualities, wouldn't you say? Human?
Also, the campy feel may not be for everyone, and while I find it endearing, some will definitely find it off-putting or too old for their taste, which is totally fair. Another thing too is that while a lot of the cast have become icons in their own right, watching the show itself, you quickly realize that it's really mostly the Kirk, Spock, and sometimes McCoy series. Uhura, Scotty, Sulu, and others often get moments, but rarely any focus. Also, towards the end of its run in the third season, the balance between cheesy and thought-provoking episodes starts to dip a little bit more into the cheese side. And I still love that, I can enjoy those episodes too, but just know that going in.
Every revolution, there's one man with a vision.
Captain Kirk, I shall consider it.
Next up, Star Trek the Animated Series.
I have to remind you, Vulcans don't tell jokes.
Times change, Doctor. Times change.
Yeah, I'm not gonna forget this show. This show is great. The animated series was made a few years after the original series was canceled in order to keep fans engaged until the movies that would eventually revitalize the franchise came around. And it's often forgotten, but honestly, it fits right alongside the original series with some classic Trek stories written by the same writers as the original. And everything I said about the original series, both positive and negative, basically kind of fits in right here. In fact, I would even say that this series has a little bit less sexism in it. In fact, Uhura herself gets to captain the Enterprise in an episode.
I am assuming command of the Enterprise. I accept full responsibility for my action.
The animation also lets Trek get slightly weirder and more grand, too, at times. That being said, it's worth mentioning that the series was done on a very limited budget by a studio known for its reuse of animation. So if you binge the animated series like I did when I first saw it, it can get a tad tedious with its repeated musical cues and animations, and the pacing can be slightly off at times.
Hurry!
Come on, insect! Move it!
And also, sometimes the camp factor for this series can be ratcheted up to 11. Like, there's a giant 11-foot Spock in one episode, and it's glorious to me, but it can definitely turn off some of you.
The salvation of a galaxy! Spock 2!
But the series is definitely worth your time and a watch, with episodes like Yesteryear being some of Trek's best that even the most ardent of Trekkies sometimes don't know about.
How?
By understanding every life comes to an end when time demands it. Loss of life is to be mourned, but only if the life was wasted.
Also, this series features the Enterprise becoming sentient and just doing practical jokes on Captain Kirk.
I've just picked up my clean uniforms from the service chute, and when I put this one on, I discovered this.
And it's the most beautiful thing you have ever seen in Star Trek ever. Star Trek movies 1 through 6. Oh yeah, you didn't think I was gonna leave out the movies from this list.
I never forget a face.
Also, I found this sweatshirt in my closet the other day, and I have not worn it in almost 8 years since I was weighing 300 pounds. So I've lost a little bit of weight since then, and I currently feel like I'm swimming in this thing a little bit. But regardless, it's kind of fun. It's gonna be a new pajama shirt. Or a sexy shirt for some of you if you... No, never mind. No one wants to see sexy Jessie in her giant Star Trek sweatshirt. Anyways, now that I've made that joke that was not in my script, the first 6 Star Trek movies all focus on the same crew of Kirk, Spock, and McCoy, and all the rest from the original series. Yet these feel, because they're movies, much more grander and epic. Totally almost dropped that, no one saw it, moving on. Everyone, but especially Kirk and Spock, get much grander arcs and depth to them, with Star Trek 2, 3, 4, and 6 all telling a cohesive and amazing character and story arc with grand, thought-provoking themes in each of them that all tie together.
Why would you do this?
Because the needs of the one outweigh the needs of the many.
Even better though, while the movies do tell one cohesive arc, at least through most of them, they also contain that diversity of tone of the original series, with some being, big grand adventures, some being deeply political, some being just weird little comedies, some being overly earnestly optimistic, and some being just outright fucking weird.
Excuse me, I'd just like to ask a question. What does God need with a starship?
Yeah, Star Trek V, you may have noticed I left out of that 2, 3, 4, and 6 character arc earlier. That's because this is a get drunk with your friends and laugh at it kind of movie. It's a lot of fun, I really enjoy it, but it's definitely a stranger one. And speaking of which, Star Trek the Motion Picture itself is a movie that I really, really love for its grand ideas and themes, but it sometimes feels a little bit stiff and sterile and kind of self-important in that kind of 2001 A Space Odyssey sort of way.
This simple feeling is beyond Vader's comprehension.
Yet it is worth saying that Spock's arc does carry through from this movie into the rest of them, so it is worth watching, but know that it's a little bit of a more slower-paced, overly indulgent kind of film that I personally love, and if you're a big fan of older science fiction, definitely will do some stuff for you, but otherwise, it's one to skip and just go right to 2 if that's going to turn you off. Overall though, I think all 6 of these movies are well worth watching for a myriad of different reasons, especially if you're more into movies over TV series that require much more time investment. Star Trek: The Next Generation. This is quintessential Star Trek.
Let's see what's out there. Engage.
TNG has become synonymous with what Star Trek is for a reason. Like the original series, the show's about a crew going off exploring new worlds and encountering thought-provoking themes and ideas and civilizations along the way. And the crew and cast is fantastic, from Picard's stalwartly moral captain to the Pinocchio-like android Data to my sexy daddy Riker.
I have a terrible problem down here on Rice.
Give me that.
Go get it.
I don't believe you did that.
Believe it.
I have thoughts about Riker. Anyways, to the aggressive Worf, every single character is iconic in their own right. TNG also has a lot of that weird camp to it as well, but in a more 80s and early 90s kind of way, like weird makeup, sometimes being very overly earnest, and also very horny, especially in early seasons like, this show fucks.
I haven't had the comfort of a husband, a man.
This show fucks a lot. Overall though, when you get down to it, TNG epitomizes Star Trek for a reason, because when this show hits, which it often does, it can be extremely biting in its messages.
He's talking about slavery.
I think that's a little harsh.
I don't think that's a little harsh. I think that's the truth.
Tell truly transformative character-based stories, have grand, epic, and inspiring moments, mysterious wonderment at the universe, and just be loads of fun too.
But I think the lesson could have been learned without the loss of 18 members of my crew.
If you can't take a little bloody nose, maybe you ought to go back home and crawl under your bed. It's not safe out here. It's wondrous, with treasures to satiate desires both subtle and gross. But it's not for the timid.
Also, while it does have more continuity episode to episode in the setting, major events, and major beats and character arcs than the original series did, it's also fairly episodic as well, so each episode feels self-contained in its own self.
We cannot take a fundamental principle of the Constitution and turn it against a citizen.
Sir, the Federation does have enemies. We must seek them out.
That's how it starts. But the road from legitimate suspicion to rampant paranoia is very much shorter than we think.
But to talk about some negatives, again, it does have some issues where it can get blinded by its own self-importance and can even sometimes get its messages wrong, especially on race and LGBTQ issues at times.
What right do you have to change us? What makes you think you can dictate how people love each other?
Now, I'll be talking about those problems more in my next upcoming Sex and Star Trek video, which I'm, by the way, very excited. I've started filming it. I'm really pumped about it. It might be my favorite video that I'm currently working on, and I really can't wait to show it to you soon. I promise it's coming. But also, getting back to this thing, sadly, while Troy and Crusher are great characters in the show, women in general within Next Generation don't get much to do, as the show is, for the most part, about the men. They do get some stuff, especially later on, but especially in earlier seasons, the women are kind of relegated to the side. Yet, for the most part, this show has aged incredibly well.
For that one fraction of a second, you were open to options you had never considered. That is the exploration that awaits you. Not mapping stars and studying nebula, but charting the unknown possibilities of existence.
Q, what is it that you're trying to tell me?
You'll find out.
Because, that all being said, this is a great time to talk about the Star Trek quality arc. Okay, so I coined this phrase, it's very scientific, but this is something that you'll find that most Trek fans generally agree upon. That there is an arc to quality that every single live-action Star Trek show from The Next Generation onwards goes through. And it's something that I think newcomers should be aware of getting into Trek. While the original series was fairly consistent throughout its 3-season run, though dipping a little bit towards the end, all other Star Trek series follow a different quality trajectory. And since this is very scientific, and to justify me having this whiteboard, I'm going to draw it as a graph. I'm also going to take off this jacket because it's from an old 11th Doctor cosplay that I had and it does not fit me. I feel like I'm hulking out in it, so I'm just taking it off now. Not all of it. You'll have to pay elsewhere for all of it, but some of it. So this bottom axis is the season number within each show that we're talking about, and this axis is the quality of the season. Every Star Trek's first season is generally its absolute worst.
If you require respect from us, I'm sure that you will see it.
Surrounded by such friendship, I feel no need for my guards. I will return shortly. Prepare to transport me then.
Yeah. Well, the first seasons of most Star Trek shows can have a few good episodes here and there. Most of them are not great.
Oh, why have you come back? You don't have what I need.
I don't know what you need, and frankly, I don't care.
The second season, though, gets a little bit better, and it's more mixed with good and bad in mostly equal measure.
Pepperoni! God, I'd love a pepperoni pizza with Bavarian olives right now. I'm starving!
By season 3, though, you're getting mostly good episodes, with some truly great ones as well, and then, by season 4, pretty much each show is running on all cylinders and just giving you banger after banger.
Mr. Worf. Fire.
Every live-action Star Trek show, and I mean every live-action Star Trek show, follows this formula. The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and yes, despite some haters out there who will tell you differently, even Discovery and currently Picard, which, as of this recording, has yet to air its season 2, have all followed this exact quality arc. Now, there is some variations and differences in reasons for the quality in each show. Like, for example, TNG was bad in season 1 because it was sticking way too hard to Gene Roddenberry's utopian vision that it forgot to tell actual good stories, whereas Voyager and Enterprise are honestly bad because they were just kind of boring at times. Whereas Star Trek Discovery was not as great in its first season because it was trying to do something new with the franchise for the first time in 20 years, which came with its own new hurdles and things to figure out. But even so, while the arc is the same, shows like Deep Space Nine actually start a little bit higher on this arc. They'll go through the same exact arc, but they'll be a little bit more higher quality right at the beginning, because I do think that Deep Space Nine is higher bar all around. That being said, while I do think the first season of Deep Space Nine is its worst, I think generally all of its episodes were good, with a few clunkers in there. I mean, move along home, anyone?
You come with me, Elma Rain.
Elma Rain, count to 4. Elma Rain, then 3 more. Elma Rain, then 3 more.
That being said though, every single Star Trek show by season 4 is hands down great, again, even Discovery, and it stays that way pretty much throughout the rest of the show. Except for maybe in season 7, if the show lasts that long, it dips down a little bit in quality. Mostly still good, but not as good as the rest of the series. Season 7 is like where you'll have every character suddenly have a random family member showing up that was never mentioned before, or alien ghost sex candles, or whatever the fuck this is.
Aren't you going to answer that, Mr. Data?
Sir?
That damn ringing. Answer it, will you?
So keep the Star Trek quality arc in mind whenever you begin your Trek journey. And if that's something that will bother you and you're not a completionist like me, you can often find good skip lists of the worst episodes of early seasons of the show in order to get you to the good stuff quicker. Star Trek: The Next Generation movies. Back to movies for a hot second. There are 4 Next Generation movies following the adventures of the crew of that series after the show ended. And I think pretty much all of them, minus 1, is worth your time. Generations feels just like a big budget version of an episode of The Next Generation rather than a movie, and even brings in Kirk for a hot second. It's not perfect, but I think it's a solid fun time. Plus you get Malcolm McDowell ranting about time.
They say time is the fire in which we burn.
Which is more fun than you'd expect. First Contact is a great mix of body and cyberpunk horror mixed with a Moby Dick-like revenge tale for Picard, as well as earnest optimism and great action mixed in there as well.
Is that Earth?
That's it.
It's so small.
It's about to get a whole lot bigger.
Insurrection is a hot mess, but it's also just kind of like a fun jaunt with the crew and characters that you come to know and love. Nemesis, however, I think is the only movie that is outright bad, and it's actually my least favorite of all the Trek movies. It's got some interesting ideas and a couple good scenes as send-offs for this version of the Trek crew as it's the final movie in their franchise, but it also fails to engage with a lot of its ideas in an interesting way, and also has a few things that I find to be honestly deeply offensive, mostly around the treatment of Troy, but in other areas too. And generally it just kind of does a disservice to a lot of the characters. That also being said, I do think it has one of the best starship battle action sequences in the entire franchise. There are some things that happen in this movie that play a role further down the line in things like Star Trek Picard and Star Trek Lower Decks, so if you really want the full Trek story, you might have to watch it. But if you don't want that, I'd give it a hard pass.
And my voice shall echo through time long after yours has faded to a dim memory.
Though I should say there are some Trek fans that deeply defend Nemesis, and I understand where they're coming from. Personally, I don't like it though. Deep Space Nine. Deep Space Nine, to me, is the best live-action Star Trek show. It does not fit the typical formula of a Trek show, but it is Trek through and through, and I think it's Trek at its best. Set on a space station orbiting the planet Bajor that has just survived a decades-long horrific occupation by the fascist Cardassians, this series took the franchise that boldly goes to new places each week and decided to instead stay in one location and actually deal with what it means to have consequences within the Trek universe for the first time.
I thought I could take the uniform, wrap it around that pain, and toss them both away. But it doesn't work like that. Running may help for a little while, but sooner or later the pain catches up with you. And the only way to get rid of it is to stand your ground and face it.
This show, structurally, is honestly my favorite kind of storytelling. While it is still mostly episodic, with each individual episode mostly telling a self-contained story, the character and story arcs are much more interwoven throughout each episode, with status quo changes and developments being a big constant part of the series as it goes forward.
But the most damning thing of all, I think I can live with it.
The show in the first season is radically different than the show in its 7th season, and that's because it evolves and grows and changes everything as you go along with each season. The dynamics of the world and universe constantly are changing, and I love it. Even further, Deep Space Nine works to deconstruct and analyze that optimistic vision of the future shown in TNG and the original series, showing a darker side to the Trek universe. Though ultimately to uphold that we can still strive for that optimistic future, even if we sometimes fail to live up to it.
What do you think? It's vile. I know. It's so bubbly, cloying, and happy. Just like the Federation. But you know what's really frightening? If you drink enough of it, you begin to like it. It's insidious. Just like the Federation.
I don't want to spoil too much about this series' plot, as some of the big events in the series are truly epic in scope, but are also more fun if you get to watch them build up to them without prior knowledge, but they are some of the grandest and most epic of any in any Trek show. Additionally, the show tackles some of the hardest political themes in any Trek series, from systemic racist systems to fascism to even the problems of capitalism.
Workers of the world, unite! You have nothing to lose but your chains.
What's happened to you?
And it even does all of that without offering some black and white solutions that some of the other Trek series do, but living in the grayness of it all. It also, in my opinion, has the most extensive and best cast in any Trek series. You have Sisko, the stalwart captain who accidentally ends up as a religious figure to Bajorans, who sometimes is forced to make morally gray decisions.
I will not rest until I stand with you again.
Or Kira, who is a former resistance fighter and terrorist who struggles with integrating herself into a post-occupation world.
But maybe losing made him a better person. Well, then a lot of innocent people died for his education. I know. I think about that a lot, but when I look at my father, I have a hard time seeing a murderer. And when I look at him, I have a hard time seeing anything else.
Or my gal Jessie, a badass alien Trill scientist gal who has a symbiote that allows her to remember past lives and who many transgender folks like me identify into.
I hope you're not holding back because I'm a woman. If it makes things any easier, think of me as a man. I've been one several times.
I absolutely love Jessie. She's one of the best and God. Hi everyone, this is my cardboard cut of Jessie. She's not terrifying at all. I don't even know know how you got in here. I'm just gonna put you over here, dear. Please don't kill me. You also have Odo, the sometimes authoritarian security chief who learns to trust others, or Miles O'Brien, the everyman engineer and most important person in the galaxy. Or Garrick, the station's tailor with a possibly dark, sinister past, and who gives all the gay vibes, like all of them.
Good day to you, Doctor. I'm so glad to have made such an interesting new friend today.
Ultimately, while Deep Space Nine does falter at times, this series is front to back amazing. The only kind of sort of knock that I can give to Deep Space Nine is that it is probably the series least inviting to new viewers. It's still totally watchable if you've never seen any Trek series. I mean, one of my closest friends is watching it without having known anything about Trek other than a couple of the movies. But I also think that Deep Space Nine feels like a kind of great culmination of the entire Trek universe and draws from all different aspects of it. So you might miss a thing or two or not appreciate things as much if you're just watching it right out of the gate. But overall, I don't think you would be making a mistake starting here. And I promise you I'm not just saying that because Jessie is standing right over there. I totally love this series. Voyager. Oh boy, Voyager is kind of an odd beast of a series. In many ways, it's almost exactly like The Next Generation, in that it's about a ship out exploring the galaxy, this time in a completely different part of the universe, with the series being about the USS Voyager being flung halfway across the galaxy working to get itself home to the Federation, without the rest of Starfleet there as backup to help it. All that allows Voyager to encounter new aliens and civilizations never before seen in Star Trek. And like The Next Generation, it's got strong characters, especially as you get further into it, with the series' first starring woman captain, Janeway, as its lead, played to perfection by Kate Mulgrew.
I suggest a compromise. Your vessel will escort us through Lokiran territory. That way you can keep an eye on us. Make sure we don't reactivate our holodecks. The other alternative is we destroy your ship.
You also have the holographic Doctor, who is one of the most fascinating characters in all of Star Trek, who slowly evolves into a sentient being over the course of the series.
Whenever Janara's program is deactivated, and I should be concentrating on my work, I find myself thinking of nothing but her.
Why don't you reactivate her?
Because whenever I do that, I suddenly feel unsettled, unsure of myself, and I have no idea what to say. Why would people seek out situations which induce such unpleasant symptoms?
Because when the other person feels the same way you do, it's the most wonderful thing in life.
Or you have Seven of Nine, a former Borg drone from the Hive-like Mind Collective, learning to regain her humanity in a Wolfchild-like arc.
I find myself constructing scenarios, considering alternative possibilities.
Even further, I'll be honest, I think Voyager has some of the best episodes of the entire Trek franchise.
We allowed him to evolve. And at the first sign of trouble, we gave him a soul, B'Elanna. Do we have the right to take it away now?
We gave him personality subroutines. I'd hardly call that a soul.
And by far has easily the most high-concept science fiction ideas of the franchise. From time travel usage to full water worlds to demon computer clown personifications of evil.
A virus, he thinks I am a virus, he thinks I am a virus.
Yeah, that's a thing in Voyager. Even Voyager's bad episodes still feel like kind of perfect Trek comfort food, something to watch while curling up in a blanket on a Saturday night and just kind of feel at home and cozy with.
You may be having a reaction to the pulsar's radiation. We should get you to the medical bay.
No, I'm not going to the medical bay.
You starship captains are all alike. You can stare down the barrel of a phaser cannon, but you can't stomach a simple medical exam.
Also, this is the series with the sex salamanders I mentioned, and believe me, every Trekkie is obsessed with the sex salamanders. We will tell you that we aren't, but all of us are. That all being said, Voyager can also be the franchise's most frustrating series. While it does feel like The Next Generation, it had the potential to be much more than that. The series' concept of being across the galaxy with a crew made up of people forced to band together from two different ideologies was never really capitalized on. Instead, the series tried to force itself to stick to a mostly continuity-less and more episodic feel like its predecessor. And for some, even myself at times, that can be really frustrating when you constantly see this endless missed potential as you go through the show. Further, while I think all the characters are great, some, especially towards the end of its run, get kind of completely ignored and shafted. I disagree with folks who say that Voyager is bad overall. I actually think it's a really good series.
If you've come to act as my conscience, you're a little late. I considered these issues 18 months ago, as I did again this morning. I came to the same conclusion.
Your conclusion is wrong.
But that frustration at the series' lack of willingness to engage with its own concept can honestly become overwhelming for some. It can really drag it down when you just look at it and be like, I wish you would just have done this cool idea that you totally could have done. But if you take Voyager on its own terms, it can be a ton of fun and still deliver the Star Trek goods.
Somewhere along this journey, we'll find a way back. Mr. Paris, set a course for home.
Star Trek Enterprise. Oh boy, the ugly duckling of the Star Trek franchise. I have to admit, as the first Trek show that I got to watch week to week growing up, I honestly have a soft spot for Enterprise, and in many ways it kind of epitomizes everything, both the good, the bad, and also the weird about Trek that I love in a condensed package.
I'm reading an ion storm on that trajectory, sir. Should I go around it?
We can't be afraid of the wind, Ensign.
Plus, it's also got the most divisive opening credits number that I absolutely adore. Go to any Trekkie convention and start singing that theme, and despite many Trek fans saying that they hate that song, almost all of them will join in faster than a Klingon drunk on blood wine. Enterprise takes place 100 years before Kirk and Spock and before the founding of the galaxy-spanning Federation, and was pitched as a prequel about showing how humanity went from where we are today to the more optimistic version that we saw in the other series.
Ever since I can remember, I've seen Vulcans as an obstacle, always keeping us from standing on our own 2 feet.
I understand.
No, I don't think you do. If I'm gonna pull this off, there are a few things I need to leave behind. Things like preconceptions, holding grudges. This mission would have failed without your help.
I won't dispute that.
Enterprise follows the crew of the first Warp 5 capable Earth Starfleet ship under Scotty Bak's Captain Archer, as they explore a less unified Star Trek galaxy. Yet, especially towards the beginning of Enterprise, the show never really does that. While it does show signs here and there of that sort of idea, its first 2 seasons just feel like another Trek show. And a kind of bland one at that. It's just kind of the same stories that we've seen a bunch of different times before in the other series. While I do think there are a few things to love in those seasons, and I personally am a little bit endeared to it for a couple different reasons, especially its more earnest optimism that the series displays, it can be kind of dull in its early episodes.
Where no dog has gone before.
Not to mention, the exploitative sexism and male gaze of Trek that had kept growing more pronounced over the years finally came to a head in this show, with women often being mistreated both visually and in the story.
Good morning, Stinky. It's a lovely day, isn't it? Stinky.
Despite characters like T'Pol being truly up there as some of the best in all of Star Trek, with Jolene Blalock earning her place alongside Leonard Nimoy as one of the best and sadly underappreciated actors in all of Star Trek.
We're in a dangerous region of space. Our assaults could cripple their ability to defend themselves.
Not if we do it right.
And what if something goes wrong?
We can debate this all day. I've made my decision.
We can't save humanity without holding on to what makes us human. Those were your words to me.
I'm no happier doing this than you are. But we're not gonna make a habit of it.
Once you rationalize the first misstep, it's easy to fall into a pattern of behavior.
I'm not rationalizing anything. I know full well what I'm doing.
I can't justify this course of action.
We don't have a choice.
I won't let you do it!
We've had our share of disagreements.
That being said though, Enterprise is probably the show that most benefits from that Star Trek quality arc that I mentioned before. Because while season 1 and 2 are middling at best, season 3 of the series decided to be the first Star Trek show to truly tell a singular story over an entire season, diving into post 9/11 themes of terrorism, interventionism, and radicalization.
Does that make it easier for you to condemn me to death? If you refuse to go through with this, you'll be condemning Trip to death.
I didn't put him in a coma.
No. But you can save him.
In a way, I will. By saving myself.
Phlox says there's almost no chance that the enzyme will work.
My life is at stake. Any chance is worth taking.
But at what cost?
It's worth saying it sometimes doesn't handle all those ideas well, and it certainly didn't age perfectly in that aspect, but the season does make the show become almost instantaneously more engaging, and can create interesting conversations on where it both failed and where it succeeded, and I think it's worth a watch either way. And beyond that, season 4 goes even further, finally paying off the show's prequel concept to full effect in a way that Star Trek Voyager was never able to do with its own concept.
When we're faced with a common threat, we put our differences aside and try to cooperate. Someone is determined to start a war in this region. I've shown you how we can stop them. But if you don't understand that, feel free to strangle each other.
Honestly, it's one of my biggest sadnesses with the entire franchise that the show was cancelled after season 4, because I really believe if Enterprise had continued, I think many Trekkies would be arguing it as one of the best Trek series ever. As it stands though, it's still well worth your watch, especially for the later seasons, and will almost certainly allow you to feel a little bit pretentious when you talk to other Trekkies when you go,
"Well, Enterprise is good, actually."
I know I get a kick out of it.
I believe we have more to discuss than trade disputes. Why wait until we get to Babel?
The Kelvin Movies. The Chris Pinoverse. I gotta be honest with you, I adore these movies. For some, these are incredibly controversial films, especially Trekkies who are really ardent fans of the next generation style era of Star Trek. Because these films not only recast the main crew from the original series, but brought in Trek's first fully new creative team in nearly 2 decades, and as a result, radically shifted the look and feel of the franchise.
Your father was captain of a starship for 12 minutes. He saved 800 lives, including your mother's and yours. I dare you to do better.
For many, that bothers them, and that's totally understandable. You don't have to like the new version of a thing just because it has Star Trek slapped onto it. But for me, these movies, which took the franchise in a much more kinetic action-adventure direction, were a much-needed breath of fresh air that revitalized the franchise after it had started to stale a bit with Voyager and Enterprise. Are they the most thought-provoking Star Trek movies? Arguably no, but I do think that they do have some really great themes and ideas in them. Not only that, the cast is pitch perfect amazing, the writing truly nails the characters, the cinematography is vibrant and engaging, and it gives everyone, every character something to do, unlike the original series, and at the end of the day, they're just fun. They're just really fun movies.
Let's make some noise. That's a good choice.
Star Trek 2009 does have a ton of logical holes in it, favoring fun plot and characters over logical consistency at times, but it's also got some seminal moments for Trek fans, including Leonard Nimoy's final meaningful appearance as Spock.
Since my customary farewell would appear oddly self-serving, I shall simply say, good luck.
Star Trek Into Darkness, to be fair, is a bit of a disappointment, making some frustrating decisions that feel more pandering to fans than making bold storytelling choices.
You have any idea what a pain in the ass you are?
I think so, sir.
So tell me what you did wrong. What's the lesson to be learned here?
But it can still be a fun movie if you just take it as a fun action-adventure romp.
Now, shall we begin?
But Star Trek Beyond is honestly one of my favorite Trek movies of all time. I think it perfectly captures the spirit of an episode of the original series, but making it feel more modern and grand.
Aye, she's a beauty, isn't she?
What a damn monstrosity. Couldn't we just rent some space on a planet?
Showing geographical favoritism among inducted Federation worlds could cause diplomatic tension.
Oh, you don't think that looks tense? Looks like a damn snow globe in space, just waiting to break.
These movies, with maybe the exception of Into Darkness, are great in my opinion, and I think you would be missing something if you didn't watch them. I did a whole series of 5 videos a few years ago breaking down this entire aspect of the franchise and why I love it that I think you should check out, so look at the playlist below. Not my vagina, just the playlist.
You asked me once why I married your mother. I married her because I loved her.
Star Trek Discovery. So now we're at the Star Trek series that are still currently on the air, of which there are more than a few. Star Trek Discovery is currently airing its Season 4 as I film this, and Disco is another controversial one for longtime Trek fans, as it took a lot of the style of the Kelvin films, but tried to put it into a more peak TV post-Game of Thronesian landscape. Set just a few years before the original series, Discovery brings that epic action, more kinetic cinematography, and stuff like that. Discovery follows the crew of the USS Discovery, and specifically Michael Burnham, a Starfleet officer who truly believes in the values of the Federation, but sometimes fails to live up to them, especially in situations that often test those ideals at the same time. But she pushes herself, her crewmates, and the world around her to be held accountable to those ideals, and often makes them come through. It's also incredibly serialized, and is more like that peak TV model of telling a blockbuster-style story over an entire TV season, rather than it feeling more like an episodic week-to-week style show. To my mind, to some degree that works, and to some degree it doesn't. I do think, even in its current Season 4, the show sometimes gets bogged down by constantly needing to have its stakes set at world ending all the dang time. It makes the story and plotting feel a bit breathless and fast-paced and a little bit white noisy at times. If everything is constantly set at, we're all gonna die! All the time, it's hard to really engage with it sometimes.
It appears this person is attempting to change the outcome of our current timeline.
And what is that outcome? A future in which all sentient life in our galaxy has been eradicated. By what? Unclear, Captain.
It's also worth mentioning that while Discovery mostly stands on its own, it does make some mildly frustrating fan service pandering choices in Season 1, but ultimately does justify those choices in Season 2, and, without spoiling, gets fully away from them to forge its own path by Season 3. That being said, when Discovery does hit with its plot, it hits. This is a show that constantly likes to swing for the home run, and yes, it'll whiff, but when it hits, it goes all the way out there.
There's a whole galaxy out there
full of people who will reach for you. You have to let them. Find that person who seems farthest from you. And reach for them. Reach for them. Let them guide you.
There are some truly grand and epic scale moments in this show, and even some that truly deconstruct Trek in an interesting way, but for me personally, I think Discovery shines best with its themes and characters, who are for the most part fantastically acted across the board and feel fully fleshed out. And while they are few and far between, while the show does have some lower key moments, they always shine because of these actors and characters.
Spock believed that together you could create something bigger than yourselves. That's what this quorum is. That's what Navarre is. That's what the Federation is.
Even further, the two things I think Discovery does best is one, really evolves that sense of infinite diversity that Trek has always striven for. There has never been a more inclusive Star Trek than Disco, and it also doesn't feel shallow or tokenizing, especially as you get further in, but instead often shows to me that Disco is working to try to authentically portray the cultures and identities that it attempts to showcase. For example, the queer family that you find in seasons 3 and 4 of Discovery is honestly beautiful, and I think perfectly captures the LGBTQ community dynamic in such a wonderful, beautiful way.
I'm stuck. Tall is stuck. And now I know what I've been missing. I have to go back. I can't.
Hey, we got you, Gray. Okay? Adira, Paul, me. We'll find a way to help you be seen, truly seen. By everyone.
Secondly, I think Discovery is the most emotional Star Trek ever, which turns off some who are here for the more sterile science fiction type storylines, and that's totally okay, but for me, I think brings a sense of truly exploring not only the galaxy, but the interior of the human condition in a way that makes older Trek sometimes feel cold by comparison.
Most people never get a chance to learn what's in their own hearts. If we figure it out, it's often not what we expected, or even what we would have chosen for ourselves. I am very grateful, Commander, to have been here to watch you discover your heart. Thank you.
Season 4's focus on mental health, for example, I think has been a truly nuanced and thought-provoking concept to build the season around. And if this season has been any indication, this show has only gotten better and better with each season, clearly following that Star Trek quality arc that I talked about before.
Let's fly.
Star Trek Short Treks. This series is made up of bite-sized 5 to 15 minute short films set in the Trek universe, and it can be a lot of fun, to a degree. Because while there are some really, really good episodes that you can just slot in to enjoy a little bit of a tiny taste of the Trek universe for a few minutes,
You better hope these bindings hold, or I'll carve off your skin like a suckling targ!
No, wait, not my face!
Well, maybe I have been falsely accused once or twice.
some of the episodes also feel more like mini deleted scenes for Star Trek Discovery, Strange New Worlds, or Star Trek Picard.
Do you calculate the precise protein concentration and small particle dispersion of emulsifiers to make a matter synthesizer dispense nothing but Spumoni ice cream when you were 9? No, you didn't, because you didn't know what ice cream was until 30 seconds ago.
And they feel like they're really there more to promote those series than be episodes unto themselves. That's not to say that they're bad by any means, and most of the short treks are all really solid, but just kind of know that going in. But pretty much every single episode is a lot of fun, especially the more standalone ones, and they all try something new for Star Trek that couldn't have been done in probably a main episode of the show.
Now for my leading lady, please.
Which makes it kind of a fun little experimental series that I hope Trek continues with to try new things on a less riskier scale than a full TV series or movie, that allows the Trek universe just to explore and maybe try new things.
Dad, I don't think I need the nightlight anymore.
Good night, my queen.
I love you, Daddy.
I love you too. Night night.
Star Trek Picard. Picard follows Picard several years after a huge galactic tragedy which caused Picard to resign from Starfleet for good, but who gets drawn back into the newly rearranged Final Frontier by larger events conspiring around him. In many ways, pretty much everything I said about Discovery can apply to Picard too. It has a more blockbuster feel, often too epic at times, but it does try to deconstruct and explore Trek in new and risky ways.
All these years, nursing my offended dignity, writing books of history people prefer to forget. I never asked anything of myself at all.
No, Admiral.
I haven't been living. I've been waiting to die.
However, there are a few extra things to say about Picard. Firstly, this show is a sequel to the Next Generation show and movies, so it plays a bit more off of your knowledge of that series than anything else, and works better if you've seen it. Secondly, I do think Picard takes a lot of cool risks with the character of Picard, as well as the Trek universe in general. There are some bold ideas for moving this franchise and universe forward in interesting directions that I think were really cool. However, I think in its first season, it really failed to capitalize on most of those ideas, often going for quick and easy story resolutions to wrap things up in a grand and epic way, rather than actually engaging with the complexity of its own risks.
We would have joined forces with the Romulans. We would be training our phases on you right now. We aren't. We won't. You know why? Because we trust you to make the right choice.
Being fair though, this show has only aired, as of right now, its first season, so keep in mind the Star Trek quality arc that I mentioned before. I'm very excited and confident after everything that I've seen from the Season 2 trailers that it will be even better, but we'll have to wait and see, and probably by the time this video's out, it'll be either close or have already started airing.
The past is written, but the future is left for us to write. And we have powerful tools, Rios. Openness, optimism, and the spirit of curiosity.
Star Trek Lower Decks. Being honest, this series is honestly my personal favorite Star Trek on the air right now, and one of my favorite Star Treks just in general. And that being the case, I've actually done a whole video on why I love Lower Decks, so I'll keep this part of the video quick and just direct you over there. Lower Decks follows the adventures of the USS Cerritos, a smaller scale starship in Starfleet, and the adventures of the lower ranking crew members on the ship, as well as the hijinks of the more exaggerated bridge crew. This is an animated Star Trek comedy series that kind of feels like Rick and Morty mixed with The Next Generation.
I can't believe you're wasting your shore leave on this.
Privacy, please.
Okay, time to go. Come on, get out of the closet. Let's go. Come on.
Are you drunk?
Yeah, dude, you should be too. I mean, this station is amazing. And they have Romulan whiskey. And I bet you thought it was going to be green, but it is actually blue. It's this very beautiful color.
Romulan whiskey is against regulation.
Yeah.
A lot of the show is deconstructing, making fun of, referencing, and just having fun in the Star Trek world. And in many ways, it's just here to make longtime Trekkies like myself just laugh at and with our favorite franchise, and sometimes even at ourselves for enjoying it so much.
I'm sorry, I gotta be honest. I didn't join Starfleet to get in phaser fights. I signed up to explore, to be out in space making new discoveries and peaceful diplomatic solutions. That's boldly going.
That being said, to just label Lower Decks as a kind of member-berry sort of Trek show, I think would be missing a trick. Lower Decks, I think, has some of the best written characters, some incredibly thoughtful arcs, some engaging commentary on both Trek and science fiction in general, and it's just a ton of fun for even those who don't know anything about Trek.
Blinded me to what I already have right here on the Cerritos. What good would a new ship be without the best crew in the fleet?
Mom, no way.
Come on, let's go tell them they wasted their trip.
Captain, I drew the banners. It was Boimler.
And like how I think many people who have never seen Star Trek vibe with my love of the franchise, I think even if you're not a Trekkie, you'll just find that you're really welcomed into Star Trek by Lower Decks. Like a warm hug by a show that just wants you to love Star Trek in its totality, both the good and the bad. I adore, like truly passionately adore Lower Decks, and I think you will too.
You did good.
Go boldly out there, mate.
Star Trek Prodigy. Okay, so this is another series I didn't have a cosplay for, so you're just getting me in my big old sweatshirts again. But Star Trek Prodigy is another animated Trek show, and it's Trek's first introductory kids show that, as of this filming, only has aired 10 episodes, but it has 10 more and a season 2 on the way. But already, having only seen those episodes, I can already tell that this show is something special. This series is meant to be a great onboarding ramp for kids to get into Star Trek, and spends a lot of its early episodes introducing Star Trek concepts like transporters, warp drive, Starfleet, or the Prime Directive to newcomers.
The United Federation of Planets, an interstellar union of different worlds and species, with shared principles of universal liberty, rights, and equality.
Equality? That sounds nice.
So even if you're a kid or an adult, it's a great place to start. Yet while it's aimed at kids, I do think it is for all ages in all that means. It's got a truly intriguing plot tied into Star Trek lore, and especially with Star Trek Voyager in a really fun way, even featuring a holographic version of Captain Janeway, still played by Kate Mulgrew.
Welcome aboard. How can I be of assistance?
The new characters, especially My Girl Rock Talk, are really fun and engaging, and it seems to be building to a really complex storyline that kid shows like She-Ra, Troll Hunters, or Kipo and the Age of the Wonder Beast are aiming for these days. So if you like animation or kids shows like this, and especially if you're new to Trek and have younger Trek fans, Prodigy is a perfect place to start.
All my life, people ask me what species I am, as if I give it a name, they'd treat me differently. Usually I make something up, cause really, who would know? But just once, instead of being asked, I just wish someone out there could tell me.
You want something that no one can give you.
Star Trek Strange New Worlds. I'm technically putting this one on here to make this video have longer legs and kind of be more evergreen, but technically as I'm filming this, we're actually a few months away from this show's first episode. That being said, I can say a few things about it. First, the show is basically a redux of Star Trek the original series, following the Enterprise crew a few years before Kirk, this time with the wonderful Captain Pike, performed by Anson Mount, playing the role originated by Jeffrey Hunter in the original series. It also promises to tell more episodic stories like the original series, though I personally hope and kind of believe that it's actually going to be more like early Deep Space Nine, telling more self-contained stories overall, but having more long-term continuity in terms of character development and character-focused plot beats.
Do Vulcans ever feel awe, Spock?
They do, Captain, but they tend to keep it to themselves.
Mostly I think that just because that's kind of the more modern style storytelling today, and I think going way back to the very, very, very episodic feel of the original series, honestly I don't think will happen today. However, the cast, most of which appeared in Star Trek Discovery Season 2, is amazing, especially the aforementioned Mount, and the amazingly sexy, especially when bearded, Ethan Peck.
I believe that you were successful. I choose to believe it.
Sorry. Whew, Ethan Peck, oh, he always gets me going, I'm sorry. Also, he's just a good Spock. Plus, the show also looks to be aiming to explore Trek characters who appeared in, but were often sidelined in the original show, like Uhura, Dr. Mbenga, Nurse Chapel, and Una, aka Number 1.
How was the trip out to Starbase 40?
Uneventful, sir.
No need to shout, Ensign Spock.
No, sir.
Honestly, this is the Star Trek show that I'm most excited to see, so here's hoping it escapes that Star Trek quality arc curse and has an amazing Season 1, though it's already been renewed for a Season 2.
Pretty much every day, there's a moment where I think to myself, I'm on Star Trek.
Whew! Alright, my voice hurts. That is literally every single Star Trek show. And hopefully that gave you a good idea on how best to pick a Star Trek series for yourself, which ones you want to watch and which ones you don't want to watch in equal measure. And if you want to just watch one or just a couple, then just pick one that sounds best to you and go for it. But that being said, if you're a crazy person and want to try to really sink your teeth into Trek, I'm going to end this video to give you a few suggestions on how best to get into all of Star Trek and what you'll get out of each watch order and for what reasons to go that way. First off, chronological order. So this way seems like the most obvious, but I'm going to immediately say it. don't watch Star Trek in chronological order. And I mean in terms of chronology within the Trek franchise timeline, which would mean that you start with Star Trek Enterprise, then go into Discovery, then maybe the Kelvin movies, then Strange New Worlds, then Star Trek the original series, and so on. Trust me, that way lies madness.
How do you know this isn't the best thing that's ever happened to me?
That's a possibility. And then again, it could kill you.
While I absolutely love the ability for the Trek universe to stay mostly cohesive over 50 years, honestly, it's kind of a hot mess at times. And I honestly think you won't get a lot out of this series by watching it this way, especially since some of the prequel series like Discovery and Enterprise really build off of older series that come later in the timeline. I do think you can do chronological order, but I think it's probably the least satisfying way. Release order. This way works much better. And yes, I know I spelled release wrong. With release order, you'll start with the original series, go through the animated series, The Next Generation, Deep Space Nine, all the way to today with Star Trek Picard and Star Trek Strange New Worlds, in the order that each show was released. This way, honestly, I think is a lot of fun because you'll get to see the franchise as it evolves, and added bonus, if you really watch it in exact release order by overlapping TNG, Deep Space Nine, and Voyager episodes, because those shows all aired at the same time, and then later overlapping Disco and even Picard episodes as well, you'll spot some really fun mentions and crossovers, big and small, that happen that are all sorts of fun in a very Marvel Cinematic Universe kind of way. Star Trek did the subtle crossover cohesive universe first, and this I think is a really solid way to experience Trek. However, it can be a little bit off-putting for those of you who can't really get into the campy vibe of the original series. Number 3, newcomer friendly order. This order favors those who want to watch Star Trek, but can't maybe get into the older stuff like the original series, but still want to have an easy way to get into Trek. For this, I'd say Star Trek Prodigy is the best place to begin, as it's really meant for that. Then I'd say maybe get into the Kelvin movies from there, and then into Star Trek The Next Generation. And then after you watch Next Generation, go wherever you wish. Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Discovery, just hop around into what you think you are most interested in. I think this way is best for getting someone into Star Trek who may not be super into or familiar with science fiction. Number 4, modern order. This is the order to watch if you're someone who really can't stand older stuff. If you really just want to stay with stuff that feels more up to date and present day. I get it, there's no judgments from me on that front. Some older stuff is fun, but it can come with some baggage with it too, and it may not be a style that you really like. So for this order, I'd start with the 3 Kelvin movies, then go into Star Trek Discovery, then Strange New Worlds, and then maybe at that point go back and watch TNG and then get into Picard. And then you can also toss Prodigy and Lower Decks in there as well if you're a big animation fan. Then, if you're still really into Trek, then maybe go back and watch some of the older stuff. Or don't, there's more than enough modern Trek to go around. Number 5, TNG order. This, to me, is my most recommended order, and the one I think that best balances quality Trek over weird and sometimes off-putting Trek, but still gives you a balance as you go through the franchise. It's similar to the release order, except I would start by skipping the original series and beginning with The Next Generation. Even further, if you find early Next Generation too rough, and in my opinion, The Next Generation's first season is the franchise's worst season, just start with season 2 of the show and go from there. Then, once you finish The Next Generation, go back and watch the original series and the movies, and then go forward from them into the TNG movies, Deep Space Nine, Voyager, Enterprise, and just continue on in release order. Like I said, this is a very subtly shifted one from the release order, but I think it really gets you to understand seminal Star Trek right off the bat with classic TNG, then gets you into the more deconstruction-y or risk-taking Deep Space Nine and Discovery later on, while still giving you tastes of classic Trek like Voyager, original series, and Strange New Worlds along the way. This is the way that I would almost always recommend for most folks getting into Star Trek. But again, this is just my advice. The joy of Star Trek is that the entire universe is your oyster, and that there's so much diversity to choose from. Seriously, you can pretty much just watch random episodes out of order from all the series, and watch it at your own pace, and for the most part, you'll still probably enjoy yourself no matter what. The wonder of Trek is that while it can be anything, from dark drama to hilarious comedy to weird to cringy, it's always welcoming, as is the Trekkie fandom. So to all my new Trekkies out there, regardless if you've seen every episode or only watched this video, I welcome you. Temba, his arms wide, to the community. And I can't wait to see you boldly go.
The most profound discoveries are not necessarily beyond that next star. They're within us, woven into the threads that bind us, all of us, to each other. The final frontier begins. Let's explore it together.
Alright everybody, my throat hurts if you can probably hear the raspiness in my voice because I've been filming this all day, but this was a lot of fun. I've been wanting to do this video for a while because people keep asking me, and it was honestly kind of a joy to like really think of my best ways to talk and display each Trek series. So I hope you all had fun with this, and I hope it's helpful to those of you who maybe want to get into Star Trek. That's what I made this for. And please share this video out with your friends and things like that if you want them to get into Trek yourself. Also, please let me know in the comments what you chose to do, whether this was helpful, what you learned, which order you decided to watch it in. I want to hear all of that. I think it'd be really, really cool. Also, just a bit of housekeeping. Don't forget that this video is available not only on YouTube, where most of you are probably watching it, but also over on Nebula. Nebula is a separate streaming service that a bunch of us educational type YouTubers are on, and I'm so proud to be on there, and I couldn't have gotten on there without all of your help, and especially to my patrons. My Patreon is how I pay the bills, and my patrons are the ones that support me being able to do these long, really overly verbose Star Trek videos. So thank you so much for supporting me, and I really appreciate each and every one of you patrons. You are absolutely lovely. Mwah. Also, before we go, don't forget to subscribe to this channel, and I have a Babylon 5 podcast that you can subscribe to where I'm rewatching episodes of Babylon 5 with my friend Vera Weil from Council of Geeks. The link is down below. But beyond all of that, I just thank you for stopping by, and I hope that you, as always, live long and prosper, my friends. Also, if you think that you've seen all my cosplays, oh, you haven't seen anything yet. Though I will say, just off camera, there's a giant pile of all my Star Trek cosplays that I wore in this video. It's a big mound. It's a big mound. Also, Jessie is judging me from the corner, so there's that too. Thank you so much to all my patrons who make this possible. I could not do this without you. I really appreciate you, and you help pay my bills. You help me be able to do these types of videos, and it really means a lot to have all of you here. So a thank you to every single one of my patrons, but an extra special patron wrap thank you to Morgan the Pirate Queen, Joe Herman Holt, Miranda Janelle, Elizabeth Tivy, DJ Samuels, Catherine Lambeth, Ashley Allen, Bo Kikio, Lily Gray, Stephen Kleinard, Jem Shin, Mary Mello, Ellie Gobert, Ish the Mad, Matt Chung, Andrew Yoha, Super Desi, Randy Thompson, Wellington Marcus, DKS Ray, Boyd and Mary Beth Earl, Vincent Ellington, Chloe Dollar, G-Man 42, Joseph Dewey, Felicia Toast, Alex Miller, Sylvester Ratto, Elizabeth Christensen, Dominic Noble, James Krivda, Barbara Brewski, Jennifer Huss, Zone 1 Librarian, Jessica Wright, Sun Corgi, Nathaniel Fraughton, Sonia Naranjo Perdo, Peter Landers, Jared Johnson, Far Engato, Geek Filter, Mountain Harpy, Celestial Dawn, Louietha Boyd, Wen Dizzle Bizzle, Shasha M, Pissed and Twisted Garage, Stephen Richardson, John Weatherby, Melinda Walter, Julissa the Pagan, Meta Whisperer, WN Edie, Cyber Quaker, Kevin Freitag, Beatrix Perfects, Alex Owen, Tiffany Danger, Bass, All the Tribbles Sing, Casual Observer, Maggie the Goblin, Gretchen Badger, Lamia, Lysa, Just Odd, Sarah Leslie Hutchkins, Cause I've Got Faith of the Heart, Flynn, Sarah Bystem, Sarah Lemero, William Stewart, Jessica Chapman, Jess Johnson, Kay Liss, Verdos Kai, Hero Rhesus, Noble Monster Comics, Blue, Skyscanner, Troy Stahl, Jason Knott, Melody Ann Winters Good, Jacob Tovar, Nathan Steele, Laura Demereau, Maeve, Andrew K, Spooky Heather Sylvia, Sean Piper, Moon Near Amlani, Strawberry Pup Tart, Polly Mina, Nikki Gordon Bloomfield, Crit Fax, Emily Loomis, Jenny Marble, Michael Godey, Pasty, Elijah M, Burr, Andy H, Corey and Vale, Honkinen. Love you all, my dears. Mwah.